Hey everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living, Luke 12:6. I'm Wendy, and today we're doing our very last episode for your Valentine's Day home decor using Dollar Tree items. We're also going to be taking a little tour of Uncle Fred's new room, so stay tuned for that. And if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it, so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. And now, without further ado, let's get started. For this project, I'm going to be using 3 of these Dollar Tree canisters. These are glass and they have the screw-on lids in the galvanized metal. And then I picked up 3 of these knobs. Sometimes you can find these, but sometimes you can't. So I always grab quite a few when I see them at the Dollar Tree. And then I'm also going to be using these stickers. They're kind of textured and pop up. So they have these 4 different shapes. So I picked up 2 of the packages. I'll be using the round ones and then 1 middle one. You can also use the different designs. I think that's pretty too. I just wanted a little bit of symmetry here. So I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in white and I'm going to do a really light coat first, kind of let that dry and then go on with your second coat. I'm also going to be painting the lids of these. And then I'm going to give it a rustic sanding at the end, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I also never really cover the bottoms of my cans because if you have it like on a dark shelf or something, it'll leave a little chalky mark on there if you move them around. And also I can see what's inside of them if you don't have them marked. Now, if you don't wait for that first coat to dry pretty well, the second coat can kind of pull off the first coat, and then you'll see some of that glass peeking through and it'll get really bumpy. So now that my canisters are dry, I'm going to take a real skinny screwdriver and hammer that into the center. I would have used my big fat nail, but it was a little bit too thick or too wide. And I'll just open that hole up a little bit by moving my screwdriver around. And this is not thin metal, but it's easy to poke that in there. And then I just screwed my knob into that little hole. And on the underside, I'm going to add my nut and make it super, super tight and snug as a bug in a rug. Now, one of my knobs, the little crystal part at the top, was a little bit skewed. So it was a little kind of tilted a little bit. So I just used my muscles to bend that back into place, and then it was perfectly straight up and down. And you might want to cut that bolt off so that it's not so long, but these are kind of just for looks right now. So if they are a problem, you can just cut those down with some really heavy duty cutters. So now I'm going to take a sanding sponge and I'm just going to rough up those edges just to give it a little prettiness. And you can totally not do this or just leave it the way they are as is. This step is totally optional, but I just like that look. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a sanding around the edges of my lids. I didn't do anything on the glass portion itself, the jar portion. So I just thought that was enough to give it additional cuteness. So now these canisters have the sides where there's little bumpity bumps, but some of the sides were a little concave or they had a little dip in them. So I just looked for the side that was the flattest so that I could put my little tags right on the front and they would be nice and flat. Now these already have a pretty sticky adhesive on them, but just to be safe, I added a little bit of extra hot glue to make sure that it stayed in place. And I'm going to do 2 with those round ones, and then in the middle I'll put that third one that's a little bit more oblong in the middle so that it looks like I meant to do that. Now these say like hope and love or something, I can't remember what they say, but you could maybe even paint over that little portion if you wanted to make these really functional and mark them with what is inside of each of those canisters. And here they are, all finished, and I love how these turned out so much. I think these could be categorized as a 5-minute craft. It's just the waiting for the paint to dry, really. Everything else is so easy peasy, and so I love how these turned out. I hope you like them too, and they will be showing up in another project, so stay tuned. For this project, I'm going to be using this wooden crate, and I believe this was something that held like either wine or champagne for something. It's just a packing situation. It was trash basically. And then I also found this really pretty hanging from the Dollar Tree, and I love the shape of this. I like the thing the way it is. You know, you could use these as ornaments. You could use it just on a wall in a small area, something, but I just love the way it is. This is going to completely change, and I'll explain all of that in a minute, but the first thing I'm going to do is clean it all up, because this was actually sitting outside on the side of our house, and so it was in the rain and everything. It's just weathered and beat up, but I knew I wanted to use this. It's been over there for quite a while, but I'm just going to take some white chalk paint and paint that up, but I do want some of that wood to peek through. And I was going to leave the inside the natural wood, but I decided to go ahead and paint it. Actually, I didn't decide. It just happened because I dropped some paint in there and it went over the sides. So anyway, it's still super pretty, and I can't wait for you guys to see how it turns out. So my original idea was that I was going to make this into a pretty little drawer type of piece, you know, kind of like a tray where I could put some pretties inside. So I'm going to line the bottom first. I have some different options. First, I have this blue pretty Dollar Tree contact paper that I have used in another project, maybe two, I can't remember, but I love this. But I didn't have any blue in my house, which wasn't the worst thing in the world, but I just decided that wasn't going to be it. And then I found this really pretty paper that I had. I thought this would work really well, and it was super pretty. It's thick paper, but I would have to use Mod Podge or something, and I was completely out of that. Then I found this really pretty brick paper that I had decided this is what I was going to use. It's peel and stick that I used in a friend's home makeover that we did a few years back. So, but when I put it inside of the drawer, it was super stark white. And because my drawer started out so yellowy with that wood, my white paint wasn't completely white. So you can see it's a little bit beigey, and so the bricks didn't look good in there. So I ended up using the blue contact paper from Dollar Tree. So I'm just gonna cut a piece off, and you see there's little pieces inside of the drawer, so I had to make the little squares so that my paper would fit in there. And then once I had a good dry fit, I'm gonna take off just a little bit of the backing sheet and start in one corner, and then gradually pull that backing paper off so that it can lay down. And I didn't have any bubbles, and if I would have, or if I didn't cut it exactly right, I could just go back in with a craft knife and cut that down so that it fit perfectly inside. So you saw me lift it up to show you guys, and here's what my idea was. I was just going to either do it sideways or up and down. I wasn't sure, but I knew I was just going to take that little medallion itself off and add that to the middle of one of the sides. But when I set it up to make sure all of my contact paper was good and in all the corners, I realized, this could actually sit up the way it is. So I decided to go back out to the side of our house where we have a bunch of scrap wood. And this is all super scrap. I mean, this sits out in the rain, which we shouldn't do, but we were doing the garage, so it just came out and never really went back in. And you can see here, this is where Michael J had cut me out one of those little mini cutting boards for another project a while back. You might recognize that. Anyway, I found a little piece of MDF, and I'm going to measure the inside of my box and just make a little shelf for right in the middle. You guys know I also don't like to measure anything, so I like to eyeball. And I'm going to just take my pencil and mark where I need to cut this down. both vertically and horizontally. So I took it to my chop saw and I'm going to cut that down first, making it the right length, and then I'll go the other way to make it the right depth. And I had to use 2 cuts in order to do that because, you know, my chop saw only goes so far. And I noticed my fingers are very close to that blade. So, but don't worry, I knew it was, and I was very careful, and I still have all of my digits. So I'll do another dry fit, make sure it fits inside of there, and it does. And so I'm going to take it back inside and paint that with my white chalk paint. Now, one thing I wanted to show you guys, just a little tip. I have these little plastic cups that I always use for my water and my paintbrushes. But if you use a votive candle holder from the Dollar Tree to put your stack of cups in there, and then your water and your brushes, it won't tip over. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. It's happened to me at least 3 times. So we don't like when that happens. So this is just a way of making that more sturdy. Just something I wanted to throw in there because if that's ever happened to you, you'll appreciate that tip. So I'm just going to paint this with my white chalk paint, and again, leave a little bit of that wood poking through. It's not really wood, but you know, that MDF or whatever that is. And then I'm going to take my ruler and put my shelf right in the middle. This was a 12-inch box, so I just went to 6 inches. I did use my ruler, but I'm not going to mark anything. I just went ahead and put it in the place that said 6 inches, and then I added 1 brad on the side, and then that way I could move it on the other side when I'm measuring, and then I'll put in another brad on the other side, and then, you know, get it more stabilized by adding more brads. And my brad nailer I will have linked down below, as well as everything else that you see in this video. And here's the reintroduction of my beautiful canisters. I'm going to put those on this shelf and then add a few goodies at the bottom. This is a little mini plant that I get from Amazon. They come in a pack of 3. I'll have these linked below, but they're perfect for little trays or pieces like this where you just need a little bit of greenery. I had these little washcloths that have our initials on there, but I had taken a couple out, so the ribbon was too loose. So I just cinched that up and used a staple to keep that in place, just to get some more life out of it for display purposes. And then I'm just going to pop that into that bottom shelf. And then I also wanted to plug my sweet friend and sister in Christ, Alicia, who has a channel here on YouTube called Lavender and Lace. She sent me a Perky Prize that had these homemade salves. She actually lives in North Carolina and was affected by the hurricane. So I would love if you could check out the link below, go to her channel and give her your support. I'll also have her Facebook link for these salves so you can purchase. She's got a bunch of really nice things on there, some crocheted items and earrings and hats and all kinds of stuff. You guys have to see it on Facebook. So I would just love it if you would send her your love. And here it is, all finished, and I think this is so, so pretty. I have it here at the end of my bathtub, but I have a niece who I consider her a niece, who is moving here in a few months, so I've already gifted this to her for her new bathroom when she gets here, and we're going to be decorating her whole house, so I love it. I hope she loves it, and I hope you like it too. For this next project, I'm going to be using 2 of these heart tins from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be using some candles also from the Dollar Tree. I have a white one. I didn't have a red one, so instead of the red, which you could totally use if you find them there, they're always there, but I'm going to use these cinnamon ones also from the Dollar Tree. They're the prettiest red and a little bit darker. So in order to seal these tins so that the wax doesn't go through, I'm going to be using this heat tape. It's intended for sublimating, and so when you put your transfers or your paper onto your fabric before you put the heat press down, this is heat resistant so it doesn't melt. Now it's super skinny because this is not what I meant to use it for. And this kind of goes awry. I'll show you that in a minute, but I'm just going to go all the way around the edges because this is a 2-piece tin. So the bottom had some little openings there where the wax could seep out. And then once I get those seams all covered, I'm going to use some hot glue to insulate it even more. Now this doesn't end up working, I think, because my tape is too thin. So if you have a thicker tape, that would work better. It kind of becomes a catastrophe, but it all works out in the end. I'm also going to cover up that hole where my twine was so that nothing seeps out of there. So I'm going to take my white candle, and I had an empty one that I've used in a prior project, and I'll take my votives and pull the little wick out from the bottom. I'll be able to use those for the candles once we're done here. And then I'm going to stick those inside of my empty candle holder and melt those in the microwave. Now, as far as how long to leave it in here, I can't really tell you because I've got two in there and I know all microwaves are different as far as wattage and so forth. So I just kept an eye on it and just watched until it was completely melted. And then while that was heating up, I'm going to take my wicks and use a little bit of hot glue to poke those right on top of my tin so that they stay snug as a bug in a rug while I pour my wax in there once it's all melted. Now I'm going to be using my handy dandy pot holders that my daughter got me for Christmas, and I will have these linked in the description box below. They have kind of a grabby stickiness to them, so they're really good, especially for this project. So I have my red and my white, and I'm going to pour a little bit of my red into that white so that I can get a pretty pink. I kind of wanted it a little bit lighter than this, but that's okay. It works out, and I think every pink is super pretty, so we're just working with what we have here. And I'm going to pull out that other wick that was in the white candle and set that aside. So now the problem that I think I did was it was way too hot. I shouldn't have poured it. I should have let it cool down a little bit. And so it melted not only my glue, but my tape as well. So it started seeping out from the bottom, and I was super concerned about my countertops. This is quartzite, and I love my island so much, and I was terrified this was going to stain it. It actually didn't, thank you, Jesus, but we just had to kind of push it down and try to keep it from flowing anymore. There was really nothing we could do once it was in there. So for the second one, I decided to put a protective piece of parchment paper down. And then in order to make that not seep on the second one, I took some aluminum foil and wrapped it around the entire base, because once it dries, it's going to seal those edges. And so I think all I had to do was let it be a little bit cooler and do it in some layers, because now I was a little bit scared, but I really wanted this project to work. But look at how pretty that pink is on the first candle. And then all the pieces that came out, once it dried, I just put it back in that same jar and reheated it, and I'll be able to pour the rest on top of that again to make it a fuller candle. So once all of my wax was completely dry and the crisis was averted, I love how these turned out. Of course, you would not have to deal with any of this if you were working with a glass heart or any kind of glass container. Anyway, I'm going to cut down my wicks with my scissors and get those cut down. And then I'm going to add this 5/8 inch ribbon to the edges of my tins. And these, again, are from Dollar Tree. They have the little cutout hearts. I have one in the light pink that you've seen me use before, as well as the red. So because they have the little holes in them, I didn't want any of my hot glue to seep through. So I just added dots of hot glue in the solid areas of my ribbon. And then I just cut the excess off and had that meet at the little tip of my heart. And here they are all finished, and I think these turned out so pretty. You can use these on trays or whatever, and they are functional. And I'll be showing these again in other reveals along the way. And you can see here also I have my love vase that I made a couple of years back. I'll have that linked in the description box below if you want to see that video and how to make this. But I love them, and I hope you guys like them too. So this next project is basically a trash to treasure. I got this pretty wreath. Oh, it's a little, messed up and old, and I thought there was a little critter in there, but I actually received it from my daughter's neighbor who was getting rid of a bunch of things, and it was in a trash bag. My daughter thought I could use it, and it was perfect for our next project. So I have these little letters that my Aunt Jeannie had used on a sign for my Uncle Fred. These are his initials, and I needed a wreath for in his bedroom. I'll show you that in a second, but I found some other things as I was going through all of his belongings. As you know, we moved him in with us just recently, so I found some slides and a photo and an old love letter. There were so many of these. Oh my goodness, my heart. But I'm going to be using these for this wreath if I can. So my aunt and uncle used to travel the world together, and there's about 70 boxes of these slides. I need to start using those for projects, but I don't want to ruin them. And then I used this love letter. There were a lot of them in there because it says care of Henry Lopez. That's my grandpa. So anyway, and then I have this little vine heart, and I'm actually going to be using 2 of those. And then some of these pitberry vines from the Dollar Tree. And I thought this was the perfect color for his room, which I'll show you once we're done with our wreath. So I'm just going to start wrapping this around the vines and the greenery that's already on there. And these grapevine wreaths can usually be found every single time you go into a thrift store, and you can actually add some greenery to it if you want. This is just how it came, so it was perfect for what I was going to be making and the style that I wanted for his room. So now to attach my letters, I'm going to take a little bit of paddle wire and just manipulate that so that I can attach it to the back of my letters. And I'm just going to use some hot glue and fold that down, or kind of make a little angled flat piece so that it goes right on that wooden letter. And then I'll just hold that there until that dries. And then I'll do the same thing for the S. And then to give those wires a little bit more security, I'm going to take those felt hearts from the Dollar Tree and cut it down to fit on the back of my letters so that my wires stay perfectly secure. And again, to attach my little vine hearts, I'm going to use my paddle wire and push it through the vine wreath. And sometimes that's a little tricky, takes a little bit of time, but you'll see I add the second one in a minute. But I'm going to also take my love letter. I don't want to use any hot glue, so I'm just feeding it in between those vines. And these are pretty tight, so it kept it in place and wasn't moving around. And then I'm going to take that sweet little picture of my aunt and uncle, and I used a mini clothespin to attach it to the wreath. Again, that gives it a little cuteness, but also doesn't ruin my picture. And since I didn't want to ruin the slides and I still want to be able to view them, we're going to have a viewing party soon. I'm just going to tuck those into this wreath also and let some of that top greenery flow over and behind it and just get it all super cutie patootie. And when I was using these slides for this project, it made me giggle a little bit because I remember after my aunt and uncle would come back from a trip that they had taken, we'd have a slide party at my grandma and grandpa's house, and my dad was never really happy to go to those. And you guys have heard me say before, the crafting that brings back memories are the best ones to make. And then here's where I'm adding that second vine heart. And I believe these are also from Dollar Tree, but you know I only retain water, so I can't be 100% sure. And then I felt like my initials, well, not my initials, my uncle's initials, but the paint was a little bit too white for everything else that was aged on here, naturally aged. So I'm going to unnaturally age these by adding some antique wax and just giving it a little bit of a knockdown on that starkness of the white. So I'll just brush a little bit on and then remove it with a paper towel. And here it is all finished, and I love how this turned out. I think it's so pretty. It's going to be perfect in his room, which again, you'll see in just a second, but it just brought all of those memories back. And it wasn't supposed to be a Valentine's Day project, but of course, anytime love is involved, that just turns it into Valentine's Day, doesn't it? Anyway, I love how this turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. Now, the thing with this wreath is, and why I'm showing it to you here, is because where I wanted it was on a mirror in his bedroom. So here's his new bedroom, and these are originally the colors that he had in his home that my aunt had decorated for him. And here you can see the wreath that's on the hall tree. This is actually a cabinet that I got from my mother-in-law, and I redid it, and I love this piece and cannot part with it. But anyway, and then we have this pillow on a chair that I purchased from Amazon. This is a pillow that my aunt made and was in his original room. There's a couple of pieces here. All of the furniture, aside from this chair and the footstool, is from his original bedroom. So you can see the fabric that my aunt used to decorate. He's got a pretty good view here. I probably need to clean those windows, but his lamp, and he uses a lot of tissue. So I got this tissue box on Amazon. I love this so much, and it matched perfectly with the room and that natural rustic look, but it's also got a little elastic holder. I don't know. I don't have tissue box holders, so I didn't know if that's just a regular thing or if it was an ingenious design on the maker's part, but this again is something that was already in his room and his bed and the other little side table. I got this new bedding for him and this new skirt. I'll have all of these things linked below. Not that you're going to use exactly this, but I just love these colors. And even though he's got a bit of dementia, it does have the feel of his old bedroom. I'm using some of these things that were in his house and in different rooms, so I think it just brings a little bit of his old home into the feel of the room. So although he can't really remember everything that he had before, maybe this just gives him a little comfort. But he does like good design and good style because he was my aunt's husband, so he pretty much had to, and she had impeccable design. Here she is at their wedding. This is my Uncle Fred, my Aunt Jeannie, and his parents. He has a Foley catheter, so this is an ugly little plastic piece, but it's got all of the supplies in there. So I'm just tucking that away so it's hidden and you can't see it until I find something else to use. So this was the dresser that we used to have in our room, but we've switched things out, and I'll show you my room in another video. And then here's where I have all of his musicals and his westerns tucked away and hidden so you can't see it. He thinks this is a theater. It's the biggest TV he's ever seen. And then I have his clock, and then this used to be our daughter's room, so that's her artwork on the light switch. And then here they are on a cruise to Hawaii some years ago. And then I just have this little bookshelf thingy that we use to put things next to his bed if we need to. And then I wanted to show you this really, really pretty picture that my aunt had bought a while back, and this was what their living room kind of looked like. And then I have the hooks on the back of the door with the mirror just for putting his clothes out for the following day. But this is it, and I think it's so pretty. I love how it turned out, and I hope you like it too. For our next project, I'm going to be using this love sign. It's got the little round pieces, and they're all stapled onto the back of this twine with a little tassel and the beads. I love it so much just the way it is. But I'm also going to be using actually three of these wood planks that you can find in Crafter's Square, and then a little bit of this white burlap You could use any ribbon for this. This is 2 inches wide, but I just wanted this to kind of go away, and that'll make sense in just a second. So I'm just using the jute twine to pull those staples out, and they came out pretty easily. But then I'm going to take my sanding block and sand over those staple marks. Now this is going to be on the inside, so you probably won't even see it. But just in case it peeks out, if you use this as a tray, you don't want to see any of those marks. So I'm going to get these in order, and then I'm going to take my planks, and I'm using 3 of them, and I'll just hot glue those all together to make it a more chunky base for this piece that we're making. So now I'm going to take my antique wax, and again, this doesn't have to match perfectly. This piece is going to be multifunctional, so it's just whatever you're going to be using it for is what you want to do. But I'm going to leave the sides in the natural wood, again, because I want that to kind of go away and blend in with my burlap that you'll see me use in just a second. But if I am using it as a little trinket tray or it's going to be seen, I wanted it to kind of have a good finish and not just be that blank wood. So after I put my antique wax on, I used a little bit of my white chalk paint and just went over it with a dry brush. And actually, I say dry brush, but it did have a little bit of water on it, so that's why it's nice and faded. And I thought it turned out looking very close to those little round plaques that we're going to be using. So now I'm going to take my ribbon, and at the very bottom, you see here why we needed a thicker piece at the bottom for the base. I'm going to hot glue that around the perimeter of my base, and I just want the edge of my ribbon to be flush with the end of my wood so that there's nothing overlapping and it'll sit flat on a countertop. Now I said you could use any kind of ribbon that you want, but you do want to make sure that it is wire edged because that makes it a little bit sturdier, and you can pinch those corners into a perfect 90-degree angle. So once I glue that all the way around my base, I left the ends open a little bit in case I needed any flexibility for putting my plaques on. And so I'm going to mark where I need to go with my glue so that I don't go above it. And that's just going to attach it to the ribbon and to the base. So I'll put a little bit more glue down at that narrow base, at the bottom of my round plaque. And then I'll just do those in order on all 4 sides. And then once I get them all glued to my base, you can see there's a little teeny gap there. So if you want to use a dab of glue right in that little opening, you can do that. And then I'll use some more glue to close up the opening of my ribbon. Now at this point, my box is already done, and you could use this just for little trinkets or jewelry or keys in the entryway. You can also use this as a candle holder. I found this beautiful pink mercury glass candle at the Dollar Tree for, I think it was $5. But this is one way you can use it as a candle holder. But I'm going to be using this as a vase cover for a Valentine's Day arrangement with some pretty florals. And you won't get to see how I put this together because when I was pushing on, I was actually pushing off. And when I was pushing off, I was actually pushing on. So I didn't get the actual footage of me building the arrangement, but I just put it in a Dollar Tree jar and then added all of my pretty pink flowers. And here I am getting ready to put my baby's breath in. So of course I'm going to push off. And then finally I figure it out, and then I'm going to add 2 of these white pretty little styrofoam hearts that came off of a bouquet, and it's done. And here it is all finished, and I think this turned out so pretty and very springy, but also for Valentine's Day, I think it's perfect. And then I can just take that vase out and use my little box as a trinket holder. And I have it on a Lazy Susan so I can show you all sides, but of course you can put this as a centerpiece so that the whole word can be seen. But I love it, and I hope you guys like it too. So here's another super easy 5-minute project. I had this little piece of wood that was in my stash. Well, actually, it was getting ready to get thrown away, so I thought I would use it. And then I have these really pretty styrofoam hearts. Dollar Tree has them in 3 different colors, or there might have been more, but the 3 were the only ones that I could see. I had the white, and then a super light pink, and then this medium pink. So I decided to paint this with some white chalk paint, and I'm going to give that a couple of coats. And really, again, the only time that this project takes is for the paint to dry. But I thought also this would be perfect because it's a little bit of a pink color to start with. So when I sand the edges, it's going to bring a little bit of that pink poking through, and that's what I wanted to match my hearts. Now I'm going to change this up a little bit, just like I do kind of almost on every project that we've done so far. But you see, I'm just taking my sanding block and getting that a little roughed up and a little smoother because I'm going to be using my black paint pen to write something on the front. So I'm just going to write "Love Grows Here" in kind of my regular cursive writing. I give it a little ups and downs just to make it a little cuter. And then I'm going to go back and do some faux calligraphy by making my downstrokes a little bit thicker. And then once I get done with this, you'll see I change it up, like I said, because I didn't love the black with my pretty little hearts. So then I decided to change my hearts, but you'll see that in just a second. So this is one way you could do it, but I would recommend using a red pen because I think that looked cuter. Well, you'll see the final result in a minute, but you can do it either way, but it's still a cutie patootie, but I'm giving you options here. So I'm going to take my styrofoam hearts and just cut those down. I just gave a longer stem, and then I can cut them down as I decide to see what height I want. And I'm going to take my drill and drill 5 holes. And instead of eyeballing it, I decided to do the cheater's way of measuring. I just took a little piece of paper and then folded it in half. That gave me the middle, and then I'll fold each of those side pieces in half until I get 5 equal distances for each of my holes. And I'm going to use a super small drill bit so that my stems will go inside and stand up. You could glue them in, but this way I can change them out. And thank goodness I didn't glue them in because I did change them out. So this way is pretty cute, and I did like it, but I decided to make it even better, I guess. I'm going to measure my little piece of wood so that I can cut out some words using my red adhesive vinyl. And then I picked out the different colors of those styrofoam hearts. So I'm just going to attach "Love Grows Here," and I'll have this font linked in the description box below because, again, I can't remember it. So I'm going to put that onto my piece of wood and then change my styrofoam hearts, and then it's done. And I think it's so cute. I think it's cuter. But because this is going onto a Dollar Tree heart tray that I got for $5, I'm going to be able to see it from both sides, so that's okay too. But I love how this turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. For our next project, I'm going to be doing a thrift flip. I got these 3 canvases, a triptych here from the Goodwill, and I was going to use this as a triptych that was going to say, "For God So Loved the World," another John 3:16 project, but I decided to use it for what I'm going to be making next. A little bit dark on the colors here, so I was okay with covering these completely up. I'm going to clean them up and then give them a couple of coats of my white chalk paint. I'm showing you here how they would have normally been if I would have used them the way they are, but you know, I'm always changing my mind. So I had completely run out of my Waverly chalk paint in white, or Snow White I think they call it now. So I had to go to my Hello Hobby chalk paint from Walmart, and I don't love it as much, but it was all I had, and I had ordered some more from Walmart.com, and as I was painting, it actually came to my doorstep. So I was excited, and I was able to complete it with my favorite Snow White chalk paint from Waverly. And you may have noticed in some of these clips that the sun is shining through my window in my craft room, and that's because I'm having to work at different hours. I usually avoid that time when it's shining onto my desk, but since our uncle has moved in, we've kind of had to adjust our schedules too, so that's why you're seeing that. So I'm going to take this into the dining room because it's so big. Once I get them all 3 painted, I'm going to turn them over onto their fronts so that I can attach these with some painter's tape, and I'm just going to run that across the seams on the back, those 2 areas where they'll come together. This way when I paint the front, they're all together, and then when it's done, I can split them apart like a triptych. So I'm going to flip that right back over, and then I'm going to take some Dollar Tree wrapping paper, and I'm using this super bright pink birthday paper so that you can see it better, but I'm just going to pull that out and cut it about the size of my canvases, the length of my canvases. I'm going to be running these up and down, as you can see, and instead of next to each other like they normally go. So I'm first going to get the middle of my canvases, and I just measured across. These are 12 by 24 canvases, so I'm going to go 12 inches. That's going to give me the middle. Wow, I'm using my ruler twice in one video. So I just put a little piece of painter's tape there so I could see where that middle was, and then that way my center line will run exactly in the middle of my canvases. And then I'm going to take a felt pen and try and draw out a big heart, and I want it to go kind of almost, you know, as close to the edge as I possibly can, and then all the way down to the bottom of my canvases, and then the little tippy tops of the heart will hit the top of my canvases, or as close to as possible. So the point being to make the heart fill the entire 3 canvases and make it one big huge heart. So once I finally get that shape that I want, and I had to do it a couple of times, I'm going to cut that out with my scissors so that my heart, I'm going to have a template now so that I can trace that onto my canvases. And there were a couple of little pointy parts that I didn't like, so I just folded it back up and then recut it how I wanted. And then once I finally got my pretty heart shape, I put a little bit of painter's tape in 4 different areas just to keep my heart down as I trace around it with some pink chalk. And this way, if I get out of control or it goes out of bounds, I can just wipe it off with my finger and keep going. And then once I get it painted, I'll be able to erase those lines as well. So now that I have my heart outline, I'm going to take my Snow White Waverly chalk paint and my Hello Hobby chalk paint in the color blush, and I'm just going to pour those onto a paper plate. And I want this to be a real dimensional and textured looking and not just completely solid. So I'm going to go around the outlines and just kind of mix those colors together, but not mixing them. And then at each of those little connections between the canvases, I just ran my brush around that so that it kind of goes along the curved edge, but I didn't paint all the way on the side. And that way when you spread them apart, you'll still see a nice finished edge, but you'll still be able to see the white of the canvas for the separation of the three of them. So while my heart's drying, I'm going to go to my Cricut and cut out my scripture that I'm going to put on top. And as I was cutting, I noticed that Connor had been in my craft room and left me a little prize. So I'm going to get these all weeded out, and I'm using the scripture 1 John 4:19. We love because he first loved us. And I'll have again these fonts all linked in the description box below. Well, not linked, I guess just listed in the description box below. And I love doing these larger cutouts because it's usually a lot easier to weed and you can go a little faster and not be so meticulous about it. So it's like a everlasting tape reveal, I guess. So I'm going to do all the steps where you get it all down and then put your transfer tape on top of it. And then I'm going to pull these up. I cut them apart so that I could do them word by word. I had them all, designed on my Cricut design space, but I was a little worried that the spacing wouldn't be exactly right with my measurements just because it's so big and I didn't want to mess it up. So I just laid them out one by one. And then I'm going to pull off the backing tape and then place them all on each of my canvases so that they would be nice and even. And although I didn't measure and I did eyeball it, if I didn't get it in the right spot, you have a little leeway with lifting it back up because the canvas material is not perfectly smooth. And the hardest part of this was leaning over because this is so large, but I wanted to keep the heart together while I was placing my words. And so I'm just kind of a little short, so I wasn't able to do it all the way or lean over towards the top canvas. So I had to do it from the other side and then keep going to the other side of my table to see if it was in the right position. But eventually I got it all on there, and I love, love, love how this turned out. And here it is, all finished, and I love this whole vignette, and I think it's so pretty and just captures the true meaning of St. Valentine's Day. I have it here with a little church and my Jesus statue that everyone asks me about. This was gifted to me, so I don't know where you can find it, but I will try to find something similar to it and link it down below. I also have my sweet book stack from another video. I'll link that below, as well as the little candle that we just got done making. But I love how all of this turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. I hope you enjoyed all of these projects, and if you did, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. I know this was a long video, but I wanted to end the Valentine's Day season with a bang. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye.